Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 72. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Our guest today is Amy Miller, a poet we've published many times over the years, one of our favorite poets, dating back to 2001. She's been in 6 issues of Rattle and Poets Respond a bunch of times. One of the poets we've published the most. I think I counted a dozen poems by Amy Miller that we've published over the years. And that might even be off. It might be like 13 or 14. But before we get to Amy, let me say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry. And if you love poetry like we do, please be sure to click the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. You follow us on Facebook. That's really important. And actually on Facebook now, turn on notifications because they're really stifling our reach on Facebook for every page. They're trying to make more money. And it helps if you follow and you turn notifications on so that you always see what we post. I try not to post too much. But wherever you listen to this, if it's after the fact, give us a rating on iTunes, whatever. You know the drill. Just click on something to make sure that the computers know that you like this stuff. For the warm-up poem today, I thought we would I just clicked the random button until I found one I was kind of in the mood for. And this poem is by Tom Meyers. And let's show it over here. This is We Are the Weather Tourists by Tom Meyers. And I don't know anything about Tom. I tried to Google him a little bit, and all I found was he's a retired elementary school teacher and has published some poems. I loved his bio. Let me read his bio first. This is from the summer 2010 issue, Rattle number 33. His bio was really fun. I wrote this poem while staying in a cabin in North Dakota. There was a coat and a wood stove, a tree outside, and no one for miles. It was January. Between writing each line, I was jumping around and doing some kind of dance, partly to stay alive, but mostly because that's how I get when I'm writing poems. So that is Tom Meyers' note from this poem. And here's the poem. This is We Are the Weather Tourists by Tom Meyers. We keep old cars in the yard, without wheels or windows, like empty turtle shells in a row. We fill an old rowboat with grain every morning around 11 and let the crows have at it. We say we're good with plants, but we're not. And in the fields we stop and wonder about what we might have in common with the wolves we hear at night, or with the men we've met who hunt them. We even wonder what we have in common with each other and why we ever moved out here. We don't know our neighbors, and when we run out of sugar, we take the truck into town. Sometimes we lose our donkey, then find him again, grazing by the barn, useless as ever. We give ourselves these false names time to time, like the wild farmers, the hillbilly artists. Now we go by the weather tourists. Every day we sit in a field and with bits of chalk draw clouds on bits of cardboard. Every night we stay inside the house writing notes on the backs of tiny mirrors, then telling the story of the black-nosed Buddha, a story about a nun and her gold statue, about smoke and selfishness. A story we all know, a story we all tell, a story about wanting, but not bad enough. That was The Weather Tourists by Tom Meyers from Rattle number 33. Now, as I mentioned, today's guest is Amy Miller. And I'm going to read the bio in the back of her book, because there's a little bit more detail than what I posted on the internet. So, this is Amy Miller's bio about the author from her newest book. Amy Miller grew up in Northern California and Western Massachusetts. She worked as a ranch hand, photographer's assistant, health food store bookkeeper, and electronic assembler before finding a home publishing with Guitar Player magazine, where she worked for 14 years. Since then, she has had a long career as an editor and print production manager at several magazines, book publishers, and the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And her poetry's appeared in a whole bunch of places, including Rattle, of course, and Nimrod, and Tinderbox, and Willow Springs, a whole bunch of places I really like to read. And she's also the author of chapbooks I Am on a River and Cannot Answer, and Rough House, which are both available for free online, which we'll talk about a little bit. But you can find the link to each of those in the show notes. She lives in Ashland, Oregon. And here she is, Amy Miller. Hey, Amy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Tim. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for being our guest. You're one of the poets, like I said, we've known and had sort of a relationship publishing your poems for so long, for 20 years almost. Do you remember, I think you even said that the first time we published a poem of yours, you got a phone call from the past editor, Stella Sue Lee. Yeah,
That's
so,
right.
I don't call anybody on the phone, so nobody should sit around. Actually, if I call people on the phone, I do for the Rattle Poetry Prize, and nobody answers anymore. Like, the days of people answering the phone
Of course.
are long gone. So then it's sort of a less fun, I guess, than hearing somebody be excited, leaving a message and saying, hey, you won the $15,000 Poetry Prize. Congratulations. And then having them call me back like 2 minutes later. It's kind of how it goes now. But anyway, so do you want to start us out with a poem? You have, I think you wanted to start with these poetry boxes, which is a really interesting concept.
Yeah. I often read these at the beginning of readings if people haven't seen them before, because they're kind of like little icebreakers. So I have these, I'll hold it up to the camera here. There are these origami cubes. So these are 6-sided boxes. I invented this form about 20 years ago. I've made probably a couple hundred of them over the years. And I pre-print the poem onto the box, and then I fold it so that the poem basically appears in 3D. So I'm going to read a couple of these. This first one is called What Goes On Inside a Box. A quiet closet life, a universe inverted, the hollow sound of space, the dark debating whether God is in there, and if so, what could be outside. That's box number 1. And I'll read this one next. I have them in all different colors and different types of paper. This one's purple, and it's called The Ant Crawls Around the Box. Maybe he's done with geometry. Maybe for him, 3 dimensions are so a million years ago. Maybe food is the Almighty, or he is the Almighty, testing our kindness.
As I was trying to keep up with that, showing people on the screen, because I have that box. These are so cool, though. Where did the idea come from to make these?
I was unemployed about 20 years ago. This was right after 9/11. I was out of work for a few months and really no possibility of finding a job for a while. And I knew that there were in the Bay Area, there were like tens of thousands of people out of work at that time. Really hard time to be out of work. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and it was a wonderful gift in a strange way, even though I was really frightened about money and everything. But I could wake up in the morning with an idea about something, some project, and I could just get up and do it. And I could do it for days until I had really gone down that alley, whether it was art or writing or whatever I wanted to work on. It really was a blessing in a way. And so I woke up one morning, I think I had a dream about corporate stationery that could be folded into something that represented the corporation. So for instance, Boeing stationery that you could fold up into a paper airplane that would have the Boeing logo on the side of it. Something like that. And I wasn't exactly thinking, I can make $1 million, doing this. But it was just, I just had this vision in my head about words printed on paper, and you fold them, and it becomes something different when you fold it. And I tried lots of different origami forms. I bought lots of origami books and looked online, and I made the little salt shaker fortune teller things that kids do in the schoolyard. I had a top. I had some pinwheel type things. And then I found this box design, which is it's an 18th century Japanese gift box design. Normally, you would give somebody a little object in it, and once I found that box form, that really clicked, because the poems just started pouring out these ideas of boxes and confinement, inside, outside, metaphysics, religion. All of these ideas, so that it begat a lot of poems, and that became sort of my major paper arts
It's interesting.
format.
It really fits with your style, which is you write short poems predominantly. They're sort of very concise is sort of how I would characterize your style. So they fit, fitting around this cube like that works really well. Is there a reason, like why do you think you're drawn to shorter poems? That's one of the things I was thinking about, because I just love, and I always wonder if it's because being an editor and reading a billion submissions a day, I appreciate short poems maybe too much, but when they work and they're short, they're just so they just hit so well or something. I don't know. There's something about the short poems, like Mike White is probably the most condensed poet that I know. And you're probably you're really up there with the condension and getting as much in as few words as possible. So is there a reason for that philosophy or what?
I certainly think it's harder to write short than it is to write long. I think that about prose. I think it about poetry too, especially about prose, actually. I think my revision process is usually one of reduction, a one of subtraction, where I'm always trying to cut out as much connective tissue as I can while still leaving enough so that the reader gets a gist of it, even if they don't get exactly the whole story. And I think I'm getting more reductive as I go, as I get older. I do sometimes write very long also, and sometimes I write prose poems. May have one later tonight. I'm actually veering a little more toward expansiveness now. Another really helpful and influential thing that I've done that has influenced my writing a lot is that I do that August Poetry Postcard Fest quite a lot. Yeah, I figured this would come up tonight because you just had a whole issue devoted to it, which was wonderful. I've been participating in that for about 8 years or so. And so every day in August for 30 days, I write what has to be a really short poem. I can only get 12, maybe 14 lines onto a postcard at the most. So this is one where you write a poem every day onto a postcard and you send it to somebody else who is participating in the Postcard Fest. And so that is a daily exercise in brevity and condensed writing. And I will say, after 30 days of that, I feel like I need to stretch my arms out. Like I feel so confined after writing that short for that long. But it really is good discipline. And I have a friend who showed me a trick a few years ago where you take one of those label sheets of name tags, like you would put on there, hello, I am, or whatever. You can only get maybe 8 lines or something if you're handwriting. And every day she would say, just wake up and grab one of those sheets and write a little 8-line poem on a name tag. And that was a great discipline too. I still do that occasionally. I'll just make a little box, on the page and fit the poem in there. It makes you do a really good practice in poetry, which is to tell a smaller part of the story without trying to tell the whole story. I think poems generally are more effective when they're really bright. It's like a really intense watercolor pigment that you're getting out of it, where you are telling this much of the canvas, but the reader can extrapolate the rest of it from this little square that you're telling.
Do you write every day? Is that something like you have a regular practice? Are you committed to that or not?
I am not a write every day kind of person. I have never been able to discipline myself enough to do that. I get really, really bored with routine. I get very tired. Anything feels like drudgery to me if I have to do it every day. And I really like to separate work from the rest of my life because I've had to work my whole life full time. And that always feels like full-time work to me if I have to write every day. So I do these writing marathons where I'll write every day for 30 days. I do one in April for National Poetry Writing Month. I do it in August for the August Poetry Postcard Fest. The rest of the year, it's a free-for-all, and I'm very undisciplined. And I tend to sort of write when the spirit moves me. I'd love to get in another 30-day marathon in there. I tried to do it in this December because there was a group of people who were doing a 30-day marathon with some prompts, but I was on my own. There was no accountability. We weren't sharing our poems or anything like that. And I tell you, I did it for 2 days, and I just got the inner teenager in me just cannot stand the confinement of that. And I gave up very quickly. So.
What's her name? The Bird by Bird, Anne Lamott, says, I never start a project in December. So maybe that was why it didn't work.
Maybe that was where I went wrong. It seemed like a very quiet December
kind of.
this
If there's
year.
one December where it might have worked, that maybe this was it. I should say, before we move on to more poems, that if anybody has any questions for Amy Miller, just leave them in the chat windows, and I'll pass them along on either YouTube or Facebook. If you're listening somewhere else besides YouTube and Facebook, find YouTube and Facebook and leave the chat message there, because I can't have too many windows open on my computer, although it's a lot. So, Amy, do you want to dive into a few more poems? Maybe, what did you want to read next? From the book?
Sure.
Okay.
I think I will read from the book. Right. This book is called The Trouble with New England Girls. Came out a couple of years ago. And you want me to read a couple in a
first,
row?
I love the cover. Where did the cover come from?
Oh,
I have it on screen for everybody so they can see at home. That the two wolves, but a very abstract kind of impressionistic painting of the two wolves.
I have some wolf poems in the book, kind of antithetical to New England, but not entirely, not anymore. From all reports, apparently there are wolves there now too. And the wolves kind of weave through the book, and so I was asked to come up with some ideas for the cover, and I kept coming back around to this idea of wolves, and I looked at a million paintings and photos of wolves online, and I'll tell you, a lot of them were very fluffy and very kind of faux Native American, kind of cartoony, eagle feathers and moonlight and all that kind of stuff. And they were not the right kind of wolves. And then I started seeing paintings by this artist whose name is Lori Justice Pace, and she's in Texas. And she also she has a lot of paintings of horses, and I'm a horse person from way back. And that was what first caught my eye. And then I saw that she had a whole bunch of paintings of wolves. And this actually is just a slice taken out of a big panel I think is about 4 feet wide, and it has about 6 wolves all together. And I just kept coming back around to this painting over and over again. And I finally contacted her, and we made a deal with my publisher, and I was just really thrilled to get this piece of artwork on there. That was a real fun journey. So I'm going to read the first poem in the book. The book's themes are, it's mostly about home, and the wolves kind of fit into that, although they're not in this poem, but it's about leaving home, losing your home, finding a home of sorts. I've moved a lot in my life. My parents and I moved across country a couple of times, and I've always been kind of confused about where home is. That's always been kind of a sore subject. So I'm going to read the first poem here. And it's about the town where I used to live in Massachusetts. Westfield, Massachusetts. What would I do here? Paint ladies' nails in a gas-hot shop out back of the mill. Marry the man who owns the tool and die. Loan my stepson's money. Write letters in the kitchen long past the TV's last breath. Even the snow is gone to the sunken bottom marsh of Crane Pond, to the migrant water tips of icicles off Granville Gorge. This bristleback town, this slasher movie paradise, calls me to the ice's edge, covers me in sleet, tells me what it could do, set me down in a sleepy house with the front porch falling in, the dog dreaming on the rug. It says I'll have to find my own damn way to make a living, my own damned way home, if I have one.
So that was Westfield, Massachusetts, from Amy Miller's book, The Trouble with New England Girls. Let me ask, before we read more poems, let me ask, how did you organize this book? It struck me reading it earlier today as a difficult book to organize. There's sort of several different themes moving through. There's like there's the New England theme and the early home, and a lot of stuff about New England, and then there's stuff about the wolves and through Oregon and stuff too. How did you why did you pick this as the title? And how did you think about putting these books together? And also, I noticed there's that thread that runs through the middle, sort of like a river running through it or something. Of those the untitled poems. It's sort of almost like echo the other poems. It's a really interesting structure. How did you, what were you thinking when you put it together in the way that it is?
Yeah. It was a long, long process. I think that I probably kicked around early versions of this manuscript for about 6 or 8 years, probably. So it changed and morphed and changed and morphed. I changed the title. You change the order of the same poems, and you come out with a different theme. The order really, really determines the theme in some ways, and so I really, really played with that a lot. Ultimately, I knew that I did have a lot of these Massachusetts poems, these New England poems. That's a really fertile ground for me, because I grew up there. I spent my teenage years there. I sort of became a person in Massachusetts, formed my worldview there. Every time I go back, I write a jillion poems. Like I'm just crammed with. I'm just writing them for weeks afterward. So there was a lot of those to put in here. But at the same time, I was going through a grief process. I'll say this is actually the 20th anniversary today of my mother's death. She died on the 22nd of December, 2000. And so she had died a few years earlier. My dad had died by the time this book came out. Some cousins, a couple of cousins had died. Some friends, a couple by suicide. I had lost some animals in that time. I mean, grief was just like this well that I was going back to again and again. And so I ended up with that sequence in the middle of this book, which is it's two sequences of poems braided together. And I was writing them separately, kind of at the same time, but I had these two separate threads going on. And it took me a while to realize that one thread was clearly about grief, and then the other thread was about the Rogue River and about rafting and about the wildlife of the Rogue Valley that I live in. And there was a lot of grief running through that sequence too. And finally, it was like once I braided them together, they kind of spoke to each other in a way that I hadn't expected. And I thought that they were more than the sum of their parts when they were combined together. And I had envisioned that as maybe a chapbook or something for a while. And then it ended up being the middle of this book. And that was a nice fit for the other poems around it. And then the wolf poems are about also losing your home, losing your habitat in their case, and then finding it again. I mean, they're making their way from Yellowstone and eastern Washington down into Oregon, into our valley, down into Northern California, and going back to their home again. And so these poems were kind of calling to my own poems about home. And in terms of sequencing, if I were to sequence this book again tomorrow, it would be completely different. I really had to just sort of commit. I'm a big believer in one poem speaking to another, or one poem answering a question that was asked in the previous poem, or something like that. Like I get to the end of one poem and it's like, what other poem is it in dialogue with in this, this mass of poems that's on my floor that I'm dealing with right now? And I just had to say, okay, at some point you just have to say, this is how it's going to be. This is what's working for me today. Put it in the can, book it, and get it out there, because otherwise I would tinker with it endlessly. So I've taken seminars on ordering poetry manuscripts. I went to the Coleraine conference, which is a 4-day conference just on poetry manuscripts, on working on your manuscript. That was very helpful. But there are so many theories about how to do this, and you can get all kinds of different advice, and there is some very good advice out there about it, but not everything works for everybody. There's so much intuition to it, and so much there's a lot of guessing. And like I say, I look back on this now, and I'm not sure about all the choices already. It's only been a couple of years since I put it together. I love it, however, and it was, you have to look back and say, okay, that was who I was and where I was then, that day, that week, that month. I have to trust myself that I did the right thing then. I have another pile of poems that I'm getting ready to put into another manuscript now, and I'm kind of half dreading it. It's, it's fun in a way, but it's a big, it's an ordeal at first. I literally have the poems all spread out on my dining room table, and I have like a little card table and counters or whatever. And at first I'm just standing there going, oh my God, like, I don't know how to do this. How's this going to happen? This is never going to happen. And I'll stand there for maybe an hour just grinding on it like that. And then, you start to just pick things up and put things together. And it's like, okay, got to make the decision.
Yeah, that's great advice for especially this time of year, because everybody is trying to put together their Rattle Chapbook Prize submissions. And it is hard,
Oh, yeah. Well, chapbooks are fun to put together because it's a microcosm of that same process on a smaller scale and usually more thematic. So there's a story arc in there usually with a chapbook. I think that's a really fun process. I love putting together chapbooks.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to read a couple more poems from the book?
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to read. This is the one on page 6, Tim. This is about my, I feel like this poem always needs a little bit of setup. This is about my high school sweetheart, whom I'm still very fond of, and we still keep in touch a little bit. And a couple of years ago, we got back in touch after kind of a long time not talking to each other, and we sort of phone dated for like the better part of a year. And I'll just cut to the chase and say that it was not the fairy tale ending. We did not end up getting back together, and I think that's okay. We still keep in touch. But this is about some of the conversations that we had when we were sort of kind of trying to decide, okay, is this still a thing that we have going on after all this past between us? This is called My Ex Sends Me Photos of His Food. On a blue plate that was the one thing his wife left him. Of meat and long simmered sauce. Of portions meted out to last the week. Of spices hand ground, hand warmed before he tosses them in the scalding sea. Of the patient heads of Brussels sprouts. Of his kitchen. His mother says, "You were so sad." His brother says, "Why do you dredge that up?" His father speaks from a small star at the corner of the universe. It was like a death in the family. The one cake I baked him was like a head crushed in a wreck. Now we're all whiskey, whiskey, whiskey on the phone. Forgive us our trips into kitsch. Heineken was so 16. We liked the girl on St. Pauli, ready and busty and blue. He sends me photos of a bush. It's spring, and the bush is the shape of a spaceship, glowing yellowish green, like life peeled off its skin and hurts in the open. Maybe snow tomorrow. The world is going backward, time in reverse. We are older, but the green beats of wings still work, still hum. Soon we'll taste apples, then berries.
And that was My Ex Sends Me Photos of His Food from The Trouble with New England Girls. Let's hear another one.
Okay. Yeah, since this is the anniversary of my mom's death, which she would not want me to commemorate, I can hear her saying, "Oh, don't do that. Celebrate my birthday or something." I'm going to read this poem's on page 13. This is a sonnet. I think I actually wrote this for a Prairie Home Companion. They had a contest years and years ago, before all the troubles. And the theme was to write a love sonnet for your mother, or for somebody who was not a lover or something like that. And it actually was a finalist in the contest, and they did not read the poem out loud, I think because it has sex and drugs in it. That might have been the problem on NPR. But they did say my name on the air. They announced it, that I was a finalist on the air, and that was very exciting. So yeah, this is about my parents and their relationship. It's called Rhode Island, for my mother. That summer in Misquamicut, when boys as ripe as roadside corn shot pool in darkened 18 over bars, I found the joy they buried deep in denim straight front pockets, pipe screens, joints, and all the damp and salty, wounded want my navigating hands could plunder. Home and sunburned, bedroom walls, my gulag, no diary, no dolls, digging sand and ashes from the trenches of my shoes. I heard her laughing, late, in bed with Dad. No malice in her voice, in love. A girl whose moody boy came home for her with mad martinis, 7 jokes to sleep on. Sleep itself, a garland he laid at her feet.
And that was Rhode Island from the book. And of course, we published this in Rattle eventually. So it's a good thing Prairie Home Companion didn't.
That's right.
I love that ending.
I know.
Hey, Amy, let me, I'm going to hang up and call you back. There's a big like buffering time. So it's weird. Like it's hard for me not to talk over you. So I'm going to hang up really quick and just call you right back.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to call Amy back in just 1 second. Let us reconnect and maybe that'll fix the issue. It's always weird when I laugh at a joke before the joke appears. So let's see.
Come on.
Here he comes.
There it is.
That's much better. Yeah. So we were up to like a 4-second buffering lag, which makes conversation tough. Yeah.
That's like halfway to the moon or something.
Yeah. Right? So I was like pausing and waiting for your lips to stop moving before I said anything. But anyway, so I wanted to ask though about one of the things I love about your work is you have the best endings. And they're usually very imagistic too. Like you're great with image. And a lot of times you end on a really, really strong image. So I've always wondered how does that come about in your writing process? Did the image, does it just appear to you? Is it like in the process of revision, you find better and better endings? Do you write toward the ending? How do you do the endings?
Oh, that's interesting. Endings are really hard. I'll just say really hard. Titles and endings are like 2 of the hardest things. And I have many a poem that I just think is great, except for that crappy ending that I just cannot figure out. So I work really hard on them. Sometimes they come easily. I rarely, I would say probably never work toward the ending. It's a process of discovery the whole way along. Occasionally I will find that I actually had the ending in the poem all along and it's in the middle there and it just needs to be brought to the end. Oh, but that's actually, that's the note that I want to hit there. In terms of ending on an image, I'm a friend of mine, a poet friend of mine, he and I have this discussion all the time. I can hear him groaning right now because I'm always in our workshop group. I'm always, suggesting that people, this might be stronger if you ended this on an image. And he and I debate this all the time. And I learned that from Dorianne Locks and Joe Millar, who were giving a workshop at the Klamath Falls Library. And this was, 12 years ago, something like that. Had a lot of people at that workshop. And it was a free thing that the library system did. This wonderful series that my friend Mary Hope, Emmy Hope, who also has been in Rattle several times. She used to run that series. Thank you, Mary, for all those great workshops. And they were very adamant about, this. If you were wondering about what to do at the end of this poem, find an image and end it on that image because it's open-ended, right? It kind of leads the reader off to think on their own. It doesn't tell them what to think. It gives them something to see while they're thinking. And I'm explaining that very inadequately, I think. But it's a good technique, and I use it a lot. And most of the time, if I'm kind of stuck and I'm like, I'm really not happy about this ending, mostly it's because I'm trying to hit that theme too hard there. I'm trying to tell people what to think when really I should just, give them an image that kind of hints at where I wanted them to go, but really they're on their own after that. I think that's a really powerful way to end a poem. And not every poem needs to end that way. But that's a conscious choice frequently on my side, and thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, it fills a lot of like we do the critiques of the week on Friday, and the things you want with a poem, you want it to be memorable, and so it like leaves an image in your head, like our memory is mostly image based, and then it also the other thing is it lets the reader interact, like it becomes a dance where you're being led, but you're not being thrown around like a rag doll, and so
that's right.
It's a good way to make it interactive too by leaving it flat with that sticky, great image, which a lot of your poems just do so well.
Thanks.
Going back a little bit, the questions are sort of delayed too, but going back to Gail Hemmon has an interesting question. She says, do you find a difference in your practice when you're writing every day versus inspiration based? Like are the poems different based on how they come?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely different. The thing that I like about those 30-day marathons, when I can get myself to do them, is that whether or not I'm inspired, I have to write that poem. So you can't wait around for the inspiration to move you. I know it doesn't move me very often. Sometimes I have to go out and lasso it, and bring it in, or hope for the best or whatever. And I write a lot of poems during those 30-day marathons that I'm not expecting to write because I have to crank something out that night. And sometimes that's drudgery, and sometimes it's not a good poem, and I'm unhappy, and I feel kind of chafed by the experience. And other nights, as I usually write at night, other nights I'm just like, whoa, where did that come from? And I never would have birthed that poem if I hadn't forced myself to sit down that night and write. So, and I love those moments of those 30-day marathons. That makes it all worth it. If I can get, 3 poems in a month that come out like that I would not have written otherwise, it is worth all the drudgery and all the teenage rebellion going on inside of me those other days. It's really a different process. I'm not really one to say, okay, I'm going to write about this and sit down and write a poem about that. Sometimes I do say, okay, I'm going to write about this, but when I sit down and write that poem, and this is kind of speaks to the inspiration thing, like, oh, I'm inspired to write this poem on those days, not doing the marathon, but when I'm just writing when the spirit moves me. I sit down when the spirit moves me, but it moves me in a really different direction most of the time. Most of the time I don't end up with the poem that I started out to write, or I start out to write that poem that I'm inspired to write, and it peters out, or it just goes clunk, halfway through. And very often I'll set that aside and I'll try it again. It's like, well, I had this germ of something. I'm going to try to go in there from a different angle and just see what happens then. So then I'm kind of playing. It's like, let me just try something I wasn't trying to do before. And once I'm not trying, that's a much more interesting poem most of the time, because it's like, you let the dog go. Let the dog go find it. Let it off the leash. So, and I think when you're trying to write a poem every day, you have to do a lot of that letting the dog off the leash thing, because otherwise you can't think of anything, right? It's so hard for me to just come up with what am I going to write about? I don't know. Just, and then it's like, pick a random thing, look at a news story and, look at a photo or whatever, and, start writing about a corner of that photo. And sometimes that's pretty interesting. And just, necessity and the mother of invention and all that. You do it because you have to, and it works out sometimes.
Well, everyone,
a really convoluted answer.
Yeah, everyone in the chat one is really loving. Vicky Miko loves "goes clunk," that phrase you used, and Caitlin Bucksbaum saying "Amen." You mentioned that those months that you write consistently, you find the most worth in, a lot of value in. I think you use those words. What is it about poetry that you value? Like, why is it like an enriching part of your life? Have you thought about that?
Oh God.
Like, is it like the feeling of writing while you're doing it? Is it like publishing and sharing your story? Is it reading? Like what is it that you get out of it?
Yeah, boy, I don't actually think about that very often. That's a really interesting question. The act of actually doing it, of creation, it is like a drug. It's like a nexus. It's like that nexus in that Star Trek movie, that heavenly place where you're trying to get back to. Oh, you were there once, and you're always trying to go back there again because it was like the best place you've ever been. So that's kind of my opiate or whatever, that creation. If I were not writing for publication, I don't know how I would feel about that. That would be a different a different feeling of fulfillment. I write very much to get my work out there, but that's, mostly in the last 20 years or so, that's been more of a thing. But it's really, I don't think about that while I'm writing. I'm trying to surprise myself all the time. And that's what I enjoy about it. It's like, how can I make this combination that's kind of like a song, or it's kind of like a collection of chords, or it's like a painting or something like that, where this thing didn't exist before, and it does now, because somehow, like I wrought it with my own hands, and I don't even quite know how I did that. I love that feeling, and I try to get back to that again and again.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the way that both are so tied together, but they're so different. Like the act of creation and the act of sharing. Like if you didn't have somewhere to share it with, even if it's like a small, just someone to show, or some little group to show it with, it's sort of hard to do it. But then the thing that you love is the act of making newness in the world or something, and playing with those puzzles. And I don't know, it's strange that it's like a frame relationship or whatever. Like it wouldn't work without the other, It's just, I don't know how they emerge.
Or it's possible that if I weren't writing for publication, I might write completely different work than I write now. One of the advantages of the 30-day marathons for me is that I think of it as woodshedding. I worked in the music industry for a long time, and guitar players always talk about, I needed to write a bunch of songs, so I just woodshedded, which meant I didn't play in public. I just went into a room and I just played for a month or a year or whatever. And I try to get into that mentality during those 30-day marathons, where I am not writing for an audience. And that can be very freeing. And sometimes I could sort of leap into a new kind of writing, a new form, a new voice or whatever, because nobody's paying attention to what I'm doing. It's funny though, in those 30-day marathon groups, the National Poetry Writing Month in particular, I do it with a group and we share our poems every day. And I can feel that I become a little bit audience centric, a little bit audience focused, and I don't like that. And I feel that way sometimes about workshop groups as well, because I can hear what this friend is going to say about that poem. This friend's not going to like that line or whatever. And sometimes I really have to kind of shut that out and truly woodshed and kind of put up some walls around me so that I am not hearing any of that, so that the true discovery can happen. And that's the really joyful part, where it's like, whoa, never wrote that before. I'm kind of excited about the way that one came out. That's different. I like that. Same thing musicians talk about, right? On the new album, all he does is stuff that's different than the old stuff. We don't like it anymore.
Yeah, but entering that zone as the artist, and just, I don't know, it's like the perfection of human consciousness or something to be creating in that way. Like Michael Jordan hitting all the 3-pointers, or whatever. It's that feeling that we all love as writers, I think. Let's hear a couple more poems. Let's do the next two.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I'm going to do the next two are two of those that braided sequence in the middle of the book. I thought I'd read one of each, so I'm on pages 20 and 21 here. So the one sequence is the untitled poems about the Rogue River. This particular one is about rafting, and the signs that they tell you to make during the safety lecture that you get at the beginning of a rafting trip. How to show if you're in danger, if you fall in the water, how to show if you're in danger, how to show if you're safe, and how to get rescued, and that kind of thing. I'll start with that. If you fall into the rapids, make an arrow with your feet. Make a pillow of everything behind you. Look up. Hang on to that one buoyant stick you brought. Remember, you may not hear voices above the water. If you know you're drowning, is this air or again that dream? Before it's too late, make an X with your arms. Think crossbones, which almost anyone can do, even if one is broken. And then across the page, this other series is about grief told through the lens of everyday objects and pop culture and kind of the things around us, grief as this many, many faceted thing that sort of lives in your life as you get older. For me, anyway. That's not the one that I
That's
planned.
all right.
I'm sorry. I'm going to a different page.
Okay.
Page. Page 31.
Okay.
Same sequence, though. The grief as a low depression over southern Indiana. A year's worth of rain already. Vines climb whatever doesn't move. Heavy was only a word before the roof stove in. Hunters are too hot, and the limestone quarry stands quiet as history. Clouds fight fast and boil a wall. Flash and roll, and it's like somebody pulled a rope and let an ocean fall down. Pull over. It may never stop, but you can't drive in all this mess. So loud it drowns the radio's wail. You're inside, alone. Your own lone breath making weather on the windows. Lights on so nobody hits you as they carom this way under their own insistent storms.
That was The Grief as a Low Depression Over Southern Indiana from The Trouble with New England Girls by Amy Miller. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you worked in the music industry for, it was Guitar Player magazine for 14 years. We read in the
That's
bio,
right.
I think. And I was just wondering, like, what was it like working in that industry in comparison to poetry? Like, were they two sort of completely separate parts of your life, or were they kind of mingle at all? And how did you get into that field as a writer?
Yeah. I wasn't doing any sort of writing really while I was working there. I was an ad salesperson for a music publisher, magazine publisher. And I was very much an outsider in that world. It's interesting, I work for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival now, and I'm very much an outsider in that world also, because I have no theater background at all. I came in for a completely different reason than making theater. But in the music industry, so I worked with almost entirely musicians and it was actually closer to 20 years because I worked for a book publisher later that was also a music book publisher affiliated with the magazine. So all my friends and coworkers were musicians for a long time. And I loved being in that world with them because it was all about creating. It wasn't this art. And there are so many talented people in the music business, which is a wonderful thing to see every day, and also kind of heartbreaking that there's so many people who are so good who don't make a living at it, who can't make a living at it. There's just not enough room in this country, for all these talented musicians to make a living doing what they love to do. So, for some of them, working in the magazine business was a day job that happened to relate to their art, and for some of them, it was an extension of their art. A little bit of everything. It was, for me, it was very separate from my life as a writer. I don't know that a lot of them even knew that I was a writer at the time. But it was, it was a joyful world to work in for the most part. And that was very, very sustaining to me as an artist, to just work in that environment where people valued their own innate ideas and their own talents and fostering those talents and practice and all of that. And they got into it for the sheer joy of it. That's why they were doing it. So I guess that's the connection. It was just a lucky break, really, that I got into that industry. I had worked in my very first job when I was 17 years old, was at a magazine. And it was because I knew somebody who worked there. They needed a receptionist, and it was an aviation. We did an aviation magazine, and we did a military electronics magazine. Those were our two magazines. So it was in the defense industry primarily. That was a strange place to be at 17 years old when I didn't know anything about that world. And I knew somebody who had worked at Guitar Player magazine, which was another local magazine. And she was always talking about how great it was. Like Jerry Garcia used to come by for jam sessions and just great fun, sex and drugs and rock and roll all the time on the job. It was like the best job ever. And then I saw, a few years later, I saw an opening at Guitar Player, and I was like, oh man, I should get back into magazine publishing. I really enjoyed being in publishing. And so I, got on part-time there, and then eventually was full-time and ended up staying there a really long time because it was a good place to work and great people, a great family of people. Many of us are still friends. Thank goodness for Facebook. We've kept in touch on social media. We call it the GPI family. That's who we are. And it's a big family. So it continues to influence my life in a way. I have so many friends still from those days.
How did you find your way into poetry? Like, at what point in your life did you start taking that seriously?
Oh gosh. Well, poetry. I wrote a lot of fiction as a little kid. I wrote a lot of stories, and got a lot of encouragement from a teacher in 7th grade. And then in high school, I discovered E. E. Cummings in some class. And I was very intrigued by the lack of punctuation and the wildness of those poems, and the way, you really had to work to figure them out. They were not giving you everything on a plate. I loved that. And I had a really great teacher, probably my freshman or sophomore year in high school, Mr. Flynn, in the Westfield school system. And he had a writing poetry class for, probably my sophomore year or something. And he was really encouraging and really, really lovely about it. And he was a tough teacher and hard to please. And so it meant a lot to me that he valued my writing and that he encouraged it. And he really gave me a big boost to keep going with that. So I filled notebooks with all kinds of E. E. Cummings type, little I. Everything was always the little I, and all over the page.
Why do you think it is that younger poets are just so drawn to the Cummings and the lowercase I?
Yeah, I think it's playful. He was a very playful poet. Although, as a teenager, I was not being playful, of course. I was much too serious for that. A mixture of playfulness and rebellion. There was the complete trashing of punctual conventions, and that was very appealing to me at 14 or whenever that was. The idea of freedom. You can just go anywhere you want on this blank piece of paper. Let the reader figure it out. That's kind of a cop out.
That's a great way to put it, though, because I've always, Cummings, like some of my favorite poems are Cummings, and even Rattle, Allen's favorite poem is the anyone who lived in a pretty how town. He recites that all the time. It's his favorite, and I love just a bunch of them, and the more serious ones that are not the grasshopper and things like that. But he just had an amazing way of moving, and then I always wonder why he isn't as in the academic world, he's so sort of trashed, I guess you could say. But but I think I always thought it was just because young people like him so much that it sort of makes it not feel serious or something.
Too much popularity. I think there are some social and political marks against him that is kind of a reckoning these days, and I couldn't even list those, but I know there are some in his case.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
There were some issues. I think there was some racism in some of his work and some of his writings, as I recall.
I'll have to look that up. I wasn't aware of that. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's read a couple more poems. We have what did we want to read next? You had
Yes. I'll read this one.
Yeah, Mad Money on 52.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
52. Great.
Yeah, so we have 4 poems left, and let's just do all 4. Let's do 2, and then we'll talk a little more, and then do the last 2. So we'll give them all.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Because our open mic is short poems, the Clogyrnach, which are all going to be very short. So I think the open mic will leave a lot of time.
Okay. All right. So I'll just say this poem is about a conversation that my mother and I had about the phrase mad money, where she corrected me. I thought that it was mad money was something that you kept in your pocket in case you wanted to do something crazy. And she said, no, mad money is in case you get mad at your date and you have to find your way home.
Oh, wow.
Like paper bus. Yeah. Mad money. And this features some scenes from her courtship with my dad. She says it's for bus fare home. Not like crazy paint the town, but mad, really mad. Hornets and hell, and how could he? And the fog was so thick, they had to stop and sleep in the car. In the morning, they saw they'd been hanging over the edge of a... Says you tuck it in a shoe in case he takes your purse, in case a hand goes over your mouth as one goes up your... Says her aunt brought home these sailors, and they all played poker, and her aunt died a drunk, but she always liked a... And the car got a flat, and he was in a cast, and he changed it with a broken... And somebody stole his shirt and his watch, but they went to Reno and got married in a borrowed... She says even then, you tuck it in a drawer in case he...
That was Mad Money. I love that that style. It's a powerful. I wanted to ask, and it's in between two poems, and I said we would just read more poems. But where did you come up with that idea? Was that a poem that you wrote a different way, and then that idea to stop everything off occurred to you, or did it just come on its own? Do you remember?
I think I did. I did write out those phrases and like told those stories, and it was so pedestrian and so boring and so obvious to actually have all those details in there. Then it just kind of became this list of things that happened. And I thought and I didn't need to tell those stories. I discovered if I cut it off, the reader completes the story, more or less. There are a few that, that are open to interpretation, certainly, but I thought it was more powerful to really cut that story off before it ends, because you know where it's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And it made it a more interesting poem. There were parts of it that I liked and wanted to preserve, but it was too much with all those stories, spelled out.
Yeah, it sort of goes back to everything you were saying earlier with the concision and the letting the reader, interact with it too. And yeah, it's a good example of all that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So I'm going to read this one that was on Rattle's Poets Respond. I think it was the first one I had on Poets Respond.
Yeah, I think so.
Shortly after you started doing it, within that first year, I think. And I don't really want to talk about the news story that sparked it. I'll just briefly say it was about a couple of young men who killed a lot of chickens, and it was a pretty big news story at that time. It was a horrible, horrible story that stuck in me like a toxic substance. And this is a poem that's very narrative, right? This doesn't leave anything out. True story. For those who would kill chickens. I wish I could show you how we saved him. Named him Stephen. Stupid name for a chicken. But when he wandered out from the woods, black sheen hooked with leaves and the crazy red rubber of his comb, we had to call him something. I thought Lucky, after a horse stomped on him so hard, caught in the corral like a mouse in traffic. Then maybe Rip, when he tucked his head in the elbow of the foreman's wife and fell asleep in her arms. Stephen, she whispered. Who knows, some baby or a friend long gone, and it stuck. I could show you my sandwiches he pulverized, his crooked jagger dance on the paddock's dusty stage, how each of us came to grudgingly help this alien flown from some coop, how a thing like that takes root on a shelf in a dark tack room, settling on an overshirt you meant to take home that now is sacrificed, no matter, to this thing you've named that needs you. Each night we closed and locked that door against whatever was out there that hadn't yet learned his name or the iridescence of his weak and perfect wings.
That was for those who would kill chickens. From The Trouble with New England Girls. There was a discussion as we were talking about the revision process over on YouTube. People were talking about what they call it, the bad poems folder, which is where people save all the poems that don't work to go through later. And I was just wondering, I mean, I do that too. I think does everybody do that? Do you do that? Do you have a bad poems folder that you save? What do you do with bad poems when you don't think that they're doing anything? Do you get rid of them? Or?
I have one big folder that says poems. I keep everything in there, published, not published, everything, not all the drafts. I put some drafts, early drafts in another folder. Um, I never consider anything completely abandoned, although there are plenty that I'll never go back to. But I have gone back to some poems that I thought were DOA, and I found something in them that I liked and that I could remember, or that I liked, that wasn't even the reason why I wrote that poem in the first place. I have gone back, and so we could talk a lot about revision. I am a ruthless reviser. I love tearing poems apart, ripping them up, changing them around, throwing things out, changing their format completely, putting them into prose, putting them back into lines. If there's something in that poem that I still like, I will just revise the hell out of it. And sometimes I've come up with poems that I like out of doing that. So I don't give up on them completely. There are a bunch from my youth that I will never revisit, and I see them in the list and I just skip them. I know which ones they are, and I do kind of leave them alone. But that's not to say that I might not find something in, there might be a germ of something in there that I could revise the snot out of and make something decent out of. It's all, for me, it's all about revision.
Another thing I was going to ask about, which I kind of forgot until just now, you were in our Persona Poems issue, which you Rattle number 63, and you had a poem, I think it's about from the perspective of Turkey on the side of the road.
The deer and the turkeys, yes, yeah. The turkey and the deer.
Which that reminded me of. And in the note, you said that you hardly ever write in persona anymore. You said it used to seem like such a great way to break out of the eye rut, to take the photobombing poet out of the poem and turn the camera outward. But then you say that lately you feel like it's more, you're too worried about appropriating and fetishizing and diminishing other people that have different experiences. Do you still feel that way? Or
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you,
sure.
Is that something you're conscious of as you write now?
Yeah, it is. And speaking of old poems, occasionally there are poems from years past where I see now that I would not want to have that poem published now. I had one that I actually took out of New England Girls. It was in the manuscript that won the prize. And then I had a quick chat with my publisher later on, and I said, I am feeling uncomfortable about this one poem. I really don't want it out in the world. So I ended up taking it out. We as people evolve and change and learn. And I think a lot of us, particularly us white writers, are going through a lot of learning, in the last few years and hopefully the last bunch of years. So that poem in particular was, it was about Arab culture, and it was about taking Arabic classes. I took Arabic language classes for about a year and a half and really had a great experience doing that. And it was about those classes. But I had some cultural stereotypes in that poem, and I was fetishizing some aspects of Arab culture. And it was so ingrained in the structure of that poem that I couldn't just pull those things out. The poem kind of fell apart without them. And I had just read an expose and a bunch of like Twitter feeds and this kind of thing about a book that a journalist had written, a white male American journalist, about some travels in the Middle East. And he had a book, and I don't know if it was on the bestseller list, so I think that there was a review of it in like the New York Times that was favorable or whatever. And a lot of Middle Eastern writers were coming out and saying, what the fuck? Like, why is this book being elevated where this guy basically dipped his toe into Arab culture? And that's it's not a monolith at all. That's a huge, bunch of cultures anyway. And he's talking about how beautiful the women are and how mysterious and exotic. I mean, he had a whole bunch of tropes and stereotypes in this book. And these writers were coming out and saying, hey, New York Times, there are a lot of good books out there by Arab writers and Arab American writers and Middle Eastern American writers that you could be featuring instead of this stack of stereotypes that this guy had published. And I started thinking about that poem about that same time, and I realized I was guilty of that was a mistake, and it was something that would be offensive to some Arab readers probably, and that was it for that poem. So that's one where I've drawn, that would go in the don't publish that folder now. So we deal with this a lot at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. We get a lot of training in this kind of thing, and we have these discussions, during the season when we're choosing plays for future seasons and that kind of thing. We talk about this literally every day, about appropriating the stories, about white writers appropriating the stories of people who belong to cultures that white American culture has traditionally oppressed. And what right do we have to tell those stories when white writers have been doing it for generations, right? So I'm a lot more sensitive to that now, and I really it's been a real blessing to get that training and to have those conversations, because they're conversations that are happening all over this country now, and they need to keep happening, and they need to happen at the local level and in the school system and this kind of thing, because we've been getting away with this kind of racism and this kind of homophobia and misogyny and on for all of this country's history for generations, and we don't have to. We can learn not to do that. We can learn to be respectful and kind to other cultures and try to mediate some of that damage that we've done.
Yeah, it's such a.
So there we go. That's my soapbox.
No, it's a good point. And to be self-aware and to realize that you made a mistake with something that you wouldn't want to publish is an important thing. The submissions that we get over some of the Shakespeare Festival, maybe there's a lot of stuff that like wow, but what are you going to do but except not publish it, I guess. So that's just the way it goes in this world. But do you want to finish up? You have 2 poems left that are newer. And I wanted to ask too, before you read them, like what direction do you think you're going in now? Like you mentioned, you're working on a manuscript. And these have these interwoven themes, which I think there's kind of 3 braided through this book, the Trouble with New England Girls. What is the book that you're working on now? What's that like? And then we can read the poems.
Yeah, well, one of the poems that I'm going to read here is from a series that I've been writing about my sister. I have 2 sisters, and my older sister died a couple of years ago. And she and I lived together 2 different times, and we were really close when we were younger. And she had substance abuse issues and some emotional issues as well. And we had as a family, we had a lot of difficulties with her, and there were divisions in the family, and it kind of blew the family apart eventually. And then she died, and she died very suddenly. And so I've been, I feel like now there are some stories that I can tell that I was not comfortable telling because when she was around, because I don't think she would want to read these things. Talk about appropriation, right? I was just saying, here I am doing it. But, I was her sister. They were my stories too. And these are from my perspective. And I'm trying to revisit these stories from a place of forgiveness and love, actually. I'm really trying to rediscover the love that I had for her for so long. And she was older than me, and I kind of worshipped her, and she was a hero to me. And so I'm telling these difficult stories and some of the happier stories too, but it's very fertile ground. And so I've got a bunch of these poems. And so I think this next book will have a great deal of that. And I always write a lot about animal rights and animal welfare. That's always part of that. How I'm going to work that all together, I don't know. I don't know that yet. That's part I'm dreading. Is this going to work? Is this a thing? Okay, so shall I go into these last 2 poems here? Yeah. Okay. So this is a prose poem about my sister and our living together. It's called Capsule. Sometimes like the kind you swallow. We live in one, that close. My sister's the red side, I'm the white. We can't keep our powder straight. Sometimes she's all acid, and then we're the other kind of capsule. Corroded bulkheads, precious little air. She pours tequila and vodka on the dials and makes a toxic cloud. And not for fun. None of this is fun now. It's life and death up here. Death stare. She leaves experiments half done. A black roast in the oven, a pan of something hardened on the stove. I shout and can't wake her. Home is trying to call her on our little tin radio. The astronauts in cryo sleep. I grab the shoulders of her suit and shake, but she's half subsumed by some alien vine, trapped in her berth. I check for breath. She's breathing, but a transdimensional fold won't let her wake. I'm tired of this metaphor, as tired, reader, as you must be. I roll it up, a tiny paper, and slide it inside a capsule. And do I swallow? Of course. Over and over, surrealist loop. A kind of propulsion, not great, but it's what we have. We're riding on a hydrofoil of slippery space. Out the window is an angry planet, furious spin. We land there for a while. She wakes up, walks out, says it's perfect. There are no inhabitants. She says I should take the ship. Take it anywhere, she says. Just take it. And I'll end with this poem that's about it's about a fiddle tune. I play violin kind of badly, and I write a lot about fiddle tunes because they're ekphrastic poems about kind of things that come to mind while I'm playing these songs. So this is Ashokan Farewell. It's about a cabin I used to live in. By the third note, it's a whine. The slide up to D, like the creak of the old front door. And inside, the smell of the gas oven I opened with a dishcloth, slow. All the openings. The backyard onto the creek. Hilltops speaking no human name. The shed up the rise with birch piled under the eaves, black scent of motor oil. Winter beat us senseless, pushed us into a warm corner of the bed. A song trying to match the wind, bow and fingers dragged with mute and slur, then sometimes bright. There are other ways to remember this. Some mornings sang like coffee poured in hungry cups.
And the last two poems, that was Ashokan Farewell from Amy Miller's forthcoming book, which might be a while before she figures out what order to put the poems in. Thanks so much for being a guest today, Amy. It was a really pleasure talking to you and reading your poems more in depth. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so it's nice to put a face to the name and hear what you have to say about a lot of things. It was a great conversation. Thanks for it.
Thank you. Great questions. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, have a good night. Bye.
You too.
Yeah, so that was Amy Miller with her book that just came out 2 years ago, The Trouble with New England Girls, which I'll show on the screen again. And that is available from Concrete Wolf. It was part of the Concrete Wolf Lewis Award series. And you can find more of Amy's work at her website, which is, I have to make sure I get it right. I don't know if there's an S. Yeah, it's writersisland.blogspot.com. There's a hyphen there. So writers-island.blogspot.com is where you'll find Amy Miller. And you can find more of her books. And if you read the show notes, which we totally forgot to talk about. I really wanted to talk about this. Two of Amy Miller's chapbooks are available for free as online chapbooks through BOAAT Press and Knuckle Press. I really wanted to talk about the decision to publish in that way, but I actually forgot about that question. So anyway, maybe we'll have Amy on next time and we will talk about that. But in the meantime, we're going to do the open lines as always. And what am I doing? There you go. The number for the open lines is 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. What you do is let it ring a few times, then just hang up, and you'll appear on my call list. I'll call you back by the end of the hour if I'm going to. It goes 2 hours is the max for the show. So don't worry about me calling you in the middle of the night if you want to call, but I will call you. Then the other option, which you can be on video too, is to send me a chat message over Skype to Rattle Poetry all one word. Just say hi on Skype that you'd like to read through the chat box, and I'll call you over video call when the time is right. And send your poem to Open Mic, that's Open M-I-C, at Rattle.com, all one word, so I can show it on screen as you read, which is always really nice. Now, there is a prompt every week, which is not necessary. It's not a mandatory prompt, but it's a suggestion. We try to write as many prompt poems as we can. And this week's prompt, just to remind you, was here, write a, oops, there you go, write a, hang on a second. There we go. Write a Clogyrnach, which is a 6-line Welsh form. There's a rhyme scheme. It's syllabic. It was tough for me. But if you manage to write a Clogyrnach, feel free to send it right now, if you haven't yet, to openmic@rattle.com. And call me up, like someone from 941's calling right now. And once again, you do not have to do the prompt. The prompt is optional. But if you have any other poems you'd like to share, we'd love to talk to as many people as we can for the next 45 minutes, or maybe a little less than that. But I'm going to take a really quick break. I'll be right back as you get your poems emailed to me. And before we do, I'm going to let you know next week's guest is going to be Sky Jackson. Sky Jackson is a finalist for this year's Rattle Poetry Prize. We also have a poem coming out in the spring issue of hers. And her chapbook, A Faster Grave, is out. And just a wonderful poet. She's been on the open mic before, so you probably recognize her. Way back last year. She's been on, I think, twice. So we'll talk to her and look at her new book, A Faster Grave, next Tuesday. So in the meantime, I'll be right back. After a little break, I'm going to get things organized. And then in 30 seconds, I'll be back. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. That gives me a little opportunity to organize things and get things all situated. And for all you to email me your poems. Now, for the prompt, I struggled with this prompt. I don't know. Megan said it was easy. And I was very angry with her for saying that, because I did not think it was easy. I thought it was really hard to write in this form without it sounding like a, what's the word, a limerick. And limericks are like silly. And I didn't want to write a silly, poem. I'm not funny enough to pull off a good limerick. But I tried. And this was actually written, I mentioned last time I read a book, last week's guest, Sarah Strong's book at the post office in line, because we have like this hour-and-a-half line. And this week, the same thing. I read Amy Miller's book in line at the post office, and then I had time to listen to a podcast, and then I had time to write this little Clogyrnach, sorry. And this is it, really quick. This is at the post office, Christmas 2020. At the post office, Christmas 2020. The lines on the parking spaces are 6 feet apart, our faces under masks. We smile, nod. It'll be a while. Nothing vile, just stasis. That is my Clogyrnach. And Megan's, which was so easy to write, she says, was here. Morning after solstice. Blue like the edges of a dream, a new sky yawns, the coffee steams. Mountains stretch and sigh. Cat paws at his eyes. Time goes by. Pour the cream. See, it doesn't sound like a limerick when she does it. I don't know. But anyway, let me see what you have. We'll call up we'll make sure definitely we get to the first time caller. So we'll definitely get to Tony Clark. I see here there's a 212 number and a 941 number. I don't think we've had before. So we will definitely get to each of you. We also have Angela Gartner, Richard Westheimer, Nivedita Karthik, Brent Stauffer, and that's who we have so far. Just one last reminder that the phone number is 818-850-7727 if you'd like to call and share a poem. Or you can send me a chat message over Skype to Rattle Poetry, all one word. And let's do first, let's try to get the Clogyrnachs. The Clogyrnachs. I said it wrong last time, and I'm going to say it wrong every time for the rest of my life. Let's call up Richard Westheimer and see what his Clogyrnach was like. Oh, he has a long one. Several stanzas. Hey, Richard, how you doing tonight? Oh, hang on, I didn't put you in. There you go. Yeah, good to see you. So you managed to do multiple, like a series of them, 4 Clogyrnachs. Clogyrnach is... I looked it up, I was looking it up to remind myself of the form, and somebody had a pronunciation with a hard K, so it's like knock, or knack. Yeah, I guess it would be Clogyrnachs, but...
As you said, first of all, Megan used the internet again. I mean, goodness, it must frustrate you.
It does. She's a good writer. So what can you do? But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So are you okay with me reading the 4?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please do. Yeah. I want to hear all 4 of these. Do you want to say anything about them, though?
December 2020 in 4 Clogyrnachs.
Okay.
I got it. Seasonal affective disorder. It's a cruel joke that solstice arrives before winter's abyss. More darkness to come, hands and spirit numb, soul succumbs to the mist. What nourishes us in the dark days? The winter garden still spills greens from ground blanketed deep beneath, mounds of autumn straw, and leaves round them drawn. We belong to dream feasts. In-law dying psychotic. Any attempt to understand the death throes of the ravaged man, a loner alone, his madness his own, cries for home, God be damned. The day after solstice. This winter is alive with verse, sung in time with the interspersed concerts of slant rhymes as the sun inclines, lo, a sign, star-spun earth.
See, somehow you didn't have a problem with it. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I could not hear a limerick, and then it just ruined the writing process. But you avoided that somehow.
I thought about enjambment, sort of like what Megan did, sort of running over the lines, and also I don't know if it was cheating to use slant rhymes, but
there's no cheating in poetry.
It certainly was not 100% in keeping, I'm sure, with the old Welsh tradition, but the slant rhymes helped me feel like I wasn't just doing a limerick.
Well, good job as always. Thanks for sharing those, Richard.
Yeah, thanks,
Have
Tim.
a good day. Okay. Let's see. And next up, let's call, where's Nivedita? Yeah, let's call Nivedita before she has to go to work. Hey, Nivedita, how you doing this morning?
Hi, Tim. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. Let me try to... Hang on, you're kind of... Move you up. Work. No. There you go. Okay. So, do you have anything to say about your Clogyrnach?
Clogyrnach.
Uh-huh.
Well, I know, according to me, it wasn't as hard to write, but again, like Richard was saying, I don't think I stayed true to the form as well.
Mm-hmm.
I threw in a few slant rhymes here and there, and I felt that anything that comes like this is sort of mystical and mythical, so it sort of flows well with more of a story. So I just had like a mini story, like sort of a kid's story sort of thing written in the Clogyrnach. It's 3 sets of 6 lines, so, and it wasn't as hard to write.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, everyone's making me feel bad tonight. Okay, so let's hear it. The slaying of the red.
Some people just like rhyming poems better.
The slaying of the red dragon. Go ahead, whenever you're ready. I've got it.
Great, thank you. The slaying of the red dragon. Deep in the forest of the night lies hidden a very strange sight. A circle of trees untouched by the breeze, where fairies live in fright. Hiding from ye Draig Goch, and heading out past 5 o'clock to forage for food, and, while at it, brood, the fairy's mood is black as rock. Then along came a knight one day and chased the beast into the bay. Happy as can be, fairies danced in glee. Finally free, trees did sway.
Excellent. That was Nivedita Karthik, of course.
And here the ye Draig Goch is Welsh for the red dragon.
Excellent.
Hence the title of the poem.
Very excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing that, Nivedita. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yep. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Okay. And now let's see. Let's try some of the new callers now. We'll get to Brent and Angela and anybody else who has a Clogyrnach later. But let's go to let's do this 212 number. I think that's New York City, right? 212. So the phone's ringing now. Just waiting for somebody to answer. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. Did you want to share a poem?
Yes, I did, and I'm listening right now.
Oh, why don't you cut that off so you don't get confused? There's like a 30-second delay, so you'll get confused otherwise. I'll mute it for a second while you do that. Yeah, so I should remind everybody every time there's a delay as the video and stuff flies around the internet, so I'm calling from the future when I call, so don't be surprised and be ready to turn off your streaming device when I do call. Are you back?
Yes.
Excellent. So who am I talking to?
This is Susan Talley.
Hey, and where are you calling from, Susan?
I'm calling from New York City, and it's kind of a rainy evening.
Yeah, I thought 212 was New York City. And what do you have for us tonight? Is this
I just felt like jumping in, and that form kind of evades me, but after hearing these poems, I think I understand it.
Well, that's great. Well, it evades me too, but maybe we can try it some other time. But yeah, I love having just new callers on the open mic. So thanks so much for joining and sharing this. This is Crosstown Street. Is there anything you'd like to say to introduce it?
Well, it was published. That's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was written about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, well, let's hear it. Whenever you're ready, I'll put it on screen for everybody to see as you read.
Thank you. Crosstown Street. Puddled walk. Dark night. She navigates past. Raindrops can't blur her animated smile. Through my withering umbrella, her impressive stride reveals a winner. Though her sneakers are wet like mine, her aura wears a pair of patent leather. Her cell phone shines like a diamond pressed to her ear.
Excellent. That was Crosstown Street. Beautiful poem to be sharing today on a rainy night in New York City. That was Susan Talley. Thanks so much, Susan.
Thank you. I look forward to listening to more tonight.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love just sitting around sharing poems. It's a real highlight for me. So thanks for joining in. Love new voices and poems. Thanks.
Thank you. Take
Good
care.
Night. Okay, so let's do Tony Clark. I believe it's the same Tony Clark we've published several times in Rattle, and Tony has a Clogyrnach too. So let's.
Tally.
Oh, I can hear myself again. So mute that. Okay, we're good. We're good. Hey, Tony, how you doing tonight?
Good. Now I'm trying to find where you are.
Well, we can see and hear you. So if you can't see,
Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good. So don't worry about it if
I
you can't see me. But
Okay.
great to see you. Yeah, we've published you. How many times have you been in Rattle? Once or twice or three times?
Just once.
Just once?
Just once. In 2007, in issue 27, the slam poetry. But I didn't slam poem, but yeah.
Well, it's great to see you.
I'm still reading Rattle and loving it. Yes, it's so nice to see you.
Yeah.
And I tried to write a serious Clogyrnach.
It's hard to do. I could see a humorous one, but I don't know. I was struggling.
You guys did great. Great. Mine is humorous.
Well, humor is good too. We need all the humor we can get these days for sure. So, okay. Do you want to go ahead and read it, or is there anything you want to say to introduce it to?
Clogyrnach, charmless. I think that I shall never see a snake I'd let get close to me. However harmless, the leg and armless are charmless as a flea. Although it must be said the flea has no more personality than a snake. It's small and will jump, not crawl. Still, they all appall me.
Excellent. I love that. Thanks so much. This is Antonia Clark with Charmless. Thanks for sharing that, Tony.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Yeah, hope to call in again soon.
I will. I will.
Please do. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. And let's do the other. We have another new first-time caller. And that was the 941 number. Unless I just haven't added somebody into my call list. Actually, I should add Sally really quick before I forget. But I'll do that in a second. So the phone's ringing now for 941.
Hello.
Hey, this is Sim with Rattle. Yeah, did you want to share a poem? I can hear myself in the background again, so just mute that.
Yeah, I just muted you.
Excellent. Thanks. So who am I talking to?
This is Patricia Rockwood.
Ah, Patricia. So glad you could call. We read your poem last week.
Yes.
Yeah, glad
I
to hear your voice
emailed
this
it
time.
to you.
Yeah, I have it. Let me get it for you. Is there anything you want to say to set it up?
Just that it was fun to try it. I've always enjoyed playing around with forms, and but this was new to me. I've never heard of this before last week, so it was kind of fun to play with. But it took me a long time, and because it sounded like a limerick, it was hard to get out of that. That rhythm.
Yeah, that's
but
exactly
I think
what
I
was having
managed
trouble.
it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's hear it. How to make tea.
How to make tea. Fill kettle, boil, pour over tea gently, steep, slowly count to 3. Heat milk, pour it in, open cookie tin, call the kin, drink with me.
That was excellent. Thanks so much. That was how to make tea. I loved it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It was Patricia Rockwood. Thanks, Patricia.
You're welcome.
Good night. Okay, let me, before we move on, let me make sure I put both Patricia and add contact. This one was Patricia Rockwood. So then we know who's calling next time. Patricia Rockwood. Thanks for bearing with me. And the last person before that was Sally. Sally Talley. Let me add up. Oh, Susan Talley. Sorry, Susan Talley. Let me add that too from the 212. Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, let's keep going with these awesome poems. We have, let's call up Angela Gartner. I'm pretty sure she has a Clogyrnach. Oh, Dark Winter. Yeah. Let's call up Angela. And let me remind you again, just one more time, if you're on the fence, it's not scary. Feel free to call in and share. The phone number is 818-850-7727, or you can send me a chat message, all one word, to Rattle Poetry over Skype, and I will call you back either way when it's your turn in line. And send your poem to openmic, @rattle.com. If you can't read but still want to share a poem, I can read a poem for you too. I want to get to the people who are here to call and read, because it's always the most fun first. But if there's time, I'm happy to read other poems too. So if you just want to email a poem and you can't get on to read, feel free to do that. So let's call up Angela Gartner. And she has Dark Winter, which is already I can tell that's a great title for a Clogyrnach. Hey, Angela, how you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Another great night of poetry. I'm always having fun. Great poems here. And you have...
Yeah, it is really good. I mean, everybody's been so good. I'm my poem's a little more depressing, but that's okay. Hey, you got a new... Is that a new picture in the background for Rattle?
Yeah, I got. I think I mentioned it like one episode way back, but I found some website that had like 80% off a framed print. So I figured I'd just get a framed print of the current issue, and that could be the background. I was gonna get an R, and then I thought this is so cheap. Maybe I'll get a new one every 3 months when new issues come out. It was only like $20. So I don't know. Yeah. After I got that though, I realized I could get a green screen. I could just get a green print and then have the internet, or not the internet, but the computer put it in. But maybe I'll do that next time.
It's cool though. Like I noticed that. I'm like, oh, that's new. Like I mean, I haven't been around in a while, so I'm like, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah. Well, if you go back through all the episodes, I always used to just have this little tiny painting that my grandma did. It was so small. It was about the size of the R. And you couldn't tell what it was. And so many people asked me, like, they emailed, hey, what's that picture in the back? And you couldn't see it. So then I realized I got to put something else there. Then I had the other bigger picture, was a picture of the art from my book cover. But then that felt like it's my own cover. I don't like that. So that's the new one. That'll be there for now on. But anyway, so... What's that?
I said it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
So Dark Winter, which is, I think that... I was actually thinking, as soon as I saw the title, I was thinking that's a perfect title for a serious Clogyrnach. Is there anything you want to say to set it up?
Yeah, it's definitely a grief poem. We lost our dog a couple weeks ago,
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so it's been kind of difficult. So, and I don't mean to depress everybody, but but it's definitely been a difficult time for our family. So, I'm just thinking about the dark winter without him. And, Biden says that a lot too about like the dark winter, but I know it's, losing our dog is small and hundreds of thousands of people, but it's definitely impacted our family.
Yeah, I don't think that's small at all. That's a really big deal. So thanks for sharing about it. And sorry you have to go through it with your kids too and everybody, I'm sure.
Well, and I mean, I wrote a poem last week about it, and the poetry, the writing helps. It actually does help with the grief. So, but yeah, so I'll read it when you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dark winter. I walked to the room in a dream, my heart ripped off at the seams. Underneath, a wise hand, twisted, scream as it bends. Did I imagine lost being? Next to me, the space is empty, branches falling, house is silent. My eyes are wandering. Look to sky, plant seeds. Did I imagine lost being? His sweet soul on the bridge looks down. In the hallway, I can only frown. Smile at memory. Love and cherishing. Did I imagine lost being?
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that. Really,
thank you.
Yeah, really touching to hear. Thanks, and hope everybody feels better soon about that.
Yeah, thank you. But have a good night.
Yeah,
thank
you.
You
too. Thanks, Angela. Good night.
Bye.
It was Angela Gartner with Dark Winter. Let me do. I pulled up a couple random poems just to share. And this is a poem from the 2014 Rattle Young Poets Anthology. I just clicked the random button, and there's fun stuff here. This is Natalie, Belle, Neal, age 9. Natalie, Belle, Neal, cat love. Lick, lick. My cat's tongue is like sandpaper. It's a nice sensation. It feels like a warm kiss. If my cat could talk, I'd say kissy, and he'd say okay. Then I'd ask, do you love me? And he'd answer, love is not divided. It goes on forever. I love you. Lick, lick. So I was thinking of that poem when earlier in the show, Amy Miller's cat made a little cameo appearance. And then it popped up as I was clicking through the random button, so that seemed like a perfect fit. And here's another one I thought I'd share. This is by Reeves Kenworth, On loved ones telling the dying to let go. And there's another, I just clicked the random button. And this is actually nominated for a Pushcart Prize. It's also from this summer, Rattle number 33. And this is Reeve Kenworth. And I think I'm going to try to play the audio. It might be too quiet. So if it's too quiet, I will just read it. But let's see. I didn't check to see how loud this was first. Let me see.
On loved ones telling the dying to let go. Don't bother yourselves, really. We're not clinging, as you put it with your gentle scorn for the inept, clinging to life like a minnow too dumb to expire when a rain pool dries up. And we're not sticking around because we fear to disappoint you. We're scratching out a bit of life here on our planet, the bed. Yes, it's dimmed, stripped, ugly, and the pain is awful, but we're sipping air, we're blood and bone. The pulse, though thready, still twitches. You think our lack of vanity and ambition is a handicap to pleasure, but we're mostly enthralled to an inward delirium of memory, a forest stream flashing with sunlight, mother smoking and reading on the couch, an Iowa paper boy wading through snowdrifts in the winter dawn. A vivid presence, that mounded snow, blue-shadowed, marred only by the boy's laboring passage, and removed from the muffled room lights here going off and on, the muffled anticipatory sadness. Meanwhile, your whispered encouragement to get going, stop hanging around inside the shell of a dead yesterday, ascend to a higher plane, etc., it's scaring us. You used to like us well enough, and now you're unlatching the door to our soul and leaving it open, like a cheerful volunteer summoning the rehabbed hawk to leave its cage. Next week you'll be having dinner and pulling closed the solid weft of curtains against the washed-out twilight of your sorrow. Solid dinner, solid you. Remember that the last sound we heard on earth was you, beloved, hissing in our ear. Time to go. Time to go.
Once again, that was Reeves Kenworth with Reeves Keyworth, on loved ones telling the dying to let go from Rattle number 33. And one more time, if you'd like to call in, we have a little bit of time left. The phone number is going to be 818-850-7727. And then you can send a chat message to Rattle Poetry and send the poem by email to openmic@rattle.com. But let's call up Brent Stauffer, who has, let's see, I don't know if he has a Clogyrnach or not. Let's see. Hey, Brent, are you there?
Yes, it's beginning to happen. I can
go.
sense that. No, wait a minute.
No, you're good. You're good.
Are you?
Oh, we lost you.
Oh, you can. Oh,
we had you, then we lost you, and now we see your progressive.
Oh wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on, it's.
Okay, there you go. You're back. You're back. Okay.
All right.
So everybody can now send you fan mail, I think, Brent.
All right. Woo.
So if you want to send Brent a Christmas card or something like that, you know you know what to do with it. So what do you have for us tonight? Let me try to find.
Oh, I have a Clogyrnach.
Clogyrnach it is. So how was your Clogyrnach experience?
Bad.
Finally somebody who feels it like I felt it. Okay.
It was tough, and I enjoyed it though. The constraints were frustrating, but once I got this stanza finished, I was like, oh, okay, hey, that's and I started on the second stanza, but I ran out of time because I waited until today to try it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I once you get into it and like figure out what you're going to write about, I think that it was okay. But it took a while to like just get it sort of put me off the mood to write, actually. Just because I don't know, if I'm reading submissions, this always happens. I'm reading submissions and someone will send some like really like sing-songy formal poem. And then it's hard to even read the next poem. Like I start reading it in that rhythm, like from the next person's submission. And I have to go like take a break and like get that sing-song out of my head. And that's how I felt here. Like I just heard a limerick and I could not de-limerick myself, but but anyway, let's hear yours. Winter Clogyrnach.
Okay. Beyond the closed blinds and curtains, what sunlight played by the fountain or leapt in the snow? Outside, what a show. Inside, though, just a man.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then the second stanza goes on to describe the man alone in his apartment and stuff, and so maybe it'll be something after a while.
Very good. Well, I hope you keep writing and keep pushing it forward. I was impressed with a few people who had extended ones.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's wow. Especially Richard.
Yeah,
I think Richard knocked it out of the park with 2 or 3 of those were just really good.
Yeah.
Just really, really good, all on their own. Just good work.
Totally agree. Well, thanks for sharing that, Brent. Always a pleasure. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Appreciate it. Good night.
Okay, I think Brent might be the last person. Let me double check to make sure I didn't miss anybody. I'll tell you again, just one last time in case, as I look, that the number is 818-850-7727 or Rattle Poetry, all one word. I do believe we've gotten everybody. Sally or Susan Talley. Patricia. Yeah, okay. Oh, let me see. We had okay, let me do some Laurel Winter gave me her phone number. So I can just call Laurel that way. Hopefully she's still here. Okay, let me call up Laurel. And hopefully that'll work. Hey, Laurel, this is Tim with Rattle. Did you want to share a poem? Oh, I hear myself in the background, so turn off your live stream. Excellent, thanks. Okay, let me unmute you again. Okay, so this is Laurel Winter, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Ashland, Oregon.
So I'm guessing that it's a friend of Amy Miller's.
Yes.
Excellent. How do you know Amy?
She's through a poetry group.
Great. It seems like a great poetry town, Ashland.
Yeah. Yep.
So what do you have to share for us? This is
So I emailed a poem. It's not the proper form. It's just a poem I like.
No, that's great. Yeah, we want poems. And it's an open mic, so anything goes. So that'd be great to hear.
The one I sent, it's called Emily Dickinson, as far as we know, never smoked a pipe. She didn't invite the neighbors over to copulate on the velvet settee. She was not a vampire or a spy or a majorette. Emily Dickinson never wasted words. Sometimes she scraped them from the bottom of her tight-laced shoe after someone had tossed them in the gutter to rot. Emily Dickinson served her heart on paper with a dash of salt, a dash of bitter, a dash of sweet. She is bone and dust, and still we eat.
Oh, I love that poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was Laurel Winter. And sorry to everybody at home, it took a while to find the poem on screen, but I got it eventually. So I'll babble it and read it so people can take a look right now.
Okay.
But
Thank you so
thanks
much.
so much. Yeah, thanks for calling in, Laurel. It's always great to hear new callers for the first time, and I really appreciate it. I hope you call in again sometime soon.
Yeah, I'll try to figure out how to use Skype better.
No, it's no problem. The phone works great. So I'm just glad you could.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Yep, bye. Yeah, that was an excellent poem. Emily Dickinson, As Far As We Know, Never. And that was published first in Tales of the Unanticipated in July 2007. And that was Laurel Winter's poem. Let me add Laurel to our phone call list too, so we know who it is next time. Just one second. Bear with me. Okay. And let's see. And now we also have Vicky Miko sent one. I don't think she's here to read it. Oh, Cameron Gray, too. Let's see. Is Cameron here to call? No. Let me see. Let's do, let me share Vicky Miko's. This is for her Rattle prompt. Oh, and again, she has a great visual. Let me put this in a Word doc again really quick. Just bear with me one second, everybody. Oh, wait, she already did. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is Vicky Miko's, and Vicky Miko does these wonderful Haiga? Yeah, Haiga, which is, or I guess it's not Haiga if it's Tonka. Tonka art. Tonka Haiga. Anyway, this is, let me get rid of this. This is Vicky Miko's, Clogyrnach. So it's, so it is for the prompt. And it's a Clogyrnach in like a Haiga type form, which is really interesting. So here we have it in the devil in this image form. And Vicky says, the symbolism for my devil tarot Clogyrnach is based on Aesop's fable, The Scorpion and the Frog. The devil card says our drives and desires are good, cathartic, and natural, but we must be aware of our behavior, monitor temptations, and never cause harm to ourself or others. And this is Devil Tarot, Clogyrnach. What you do when no one's around. You tease, you sting, two-faced and loud. You're all things carnal, always natural, riddled, vile, and unbound. And there it is of that cool art, The Devil by Vicky Miko. Thanks so much for sharing that, Vicky. And I think there was one more person who, let's see, Vicky. How much time do we have left? Yeah, we have a few minutes left. Let's see. So this is Cameron Gray, who sometimes is able to call in, but it hasn't been able to right now. I don't think. Yep. So I will. I'll just read this for Cameron. And there's some pictures too that Cameron sent along with this. This is a photo of her for kids, I think. Let me just show. Of her brother. So she says it's been 3 years since she lost her brother. And here's a photo. There's two of them. Here's one. And then the other. There he is. And this is Cameron's poem that she would like me to read. This is December 23rd. Here we go. December 23rd. My face was leaking again today from the corners of my eyes, so I found a pan both deep and wide, wired it tight so I could breathe, rest beside. The box came full in an hour or two, and a pool had started to form. So I fashioned a drain to run outside the house, and I continued to leak in the warm. I connected some hose to the holes in my nose, my shirt being covered with slime. Having been here before, I ran lines out the door. I'm not going to drown this time. I curled up on my side with nothing but closed eyes, a blanket, and moving pictures of you. 23 years isn't enough to do it justice. There was so much more for us to do. I remember your face as a toddler with a cup, relentlessly shoving at me. I was a few years older and could reach the counter to get you some more hot tea. That red hair and freckles under a toy cowboy hat got attention from every passerby. Wranglers and boots wherever you ventured, 'cause you wanted to be a real tough guy. I can still see your thumb, shriveled and pale, while the nail was deep sunken across the top. It lived in your mouth while you fiddled my ear. You were 7 when you decided to stop. Time pushed you out of those cowboy jeans for years. You were an ornery little cuss. And I worked you like a science experiment to make you cry and laugh and fuss. Then one day you were grown with a mind of your own, and your shoulders came up to my ears, towering over me with a sensitive nature that you learned to hide through the years. I can still see your face on your wedding day, completely painted with love. I know you meant till death do us part, and you believed there was a God above. But it's a goddamn shame all convictions aren't the same, and your lady had to get out. I just needed more time to mend all your feelings, your fear, your mind, and your doubt. I can still see the cart full of useless Christmas gifts that I was filling when I got the call. You were in your car, and you could be asleep, but you hadn't moved at all. I arrived on the scene hysterical. I screamed, "Why aren't they helping him?" Everyone knew what I couldn't accept. I'd lost my brother, my best friend. I can still see your arm as it dangled from the car when they finally opened the door. Then you slept in that box with your skin turning gray while we leaked rivers across the floor. Wow, that was a powerful poem and a Clogyrnach too. Wow, thanks so much for sharing that, Cameron. That was wonderful and tragic too, and very moving. Thanks for sharing that. And once again, here's a photo of Cameron's brother. Okay, so I think that is going to be it for our show, but just amazing poems all around. Thanks, everybody, for participating, as always. We did mention the Rattle Chapbook Prize, so I wanted to just throw that up on the screen. We publish, if you're not a subscriber to Rattle, we publish 4 chapbooks every year. One of them is the Young Poets Anthology, but the other 3 are single collections by a single author. And the deadline is January 15th, so find that, go to rattle.com/chapbooks or something like that, and you'll find the Rattle Chapbook Prize. It's a huge prize and a lot of readers, and really one of the best ways to publish if you're lucky enough to be one of the winners, I guess you could say. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast, once again, is going to be Sky Jackson. And Sky's newest book, of course, is A Faster Grave, which came out last year. She's in the current issue of Rattle, she's one of the Rattle Poetry Prize finalists. And she also has another poem coming out in the spring issue. That's Sky Jackson, Rattlecast number 73, and the prompt for Rattlecast number 73 is going to be right here. Oops. Let's see. I have too many windows up right now. Okay, here it is. This is write a poem titled Astronaut. Avoid using the words space, spaceships, stars, moon, rocket, or planet. So once again, that's the prompt for next week. Write a poem titled Astronaut. Avoid using the words space, spaceships, stars, moon, rocket, or planet. And that will be the prompt for Rattlecast number 73 with Sky Jackson. Next Tuesday, December 29th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Just like always, hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week and a happy holidays to everybody. We will be doing Critique of the Week, of course, too, but we're moving it up because Friday is Christmas Day, and so I assume no one's going to want to do a poetry critique on Christmas Day, so we're going to move up to Saturday this week. But otherwise, we're still doing everything. Sunday, we will have the Poetry Spawn Live open mic. And next Tuesday, once again, Sky Jackson and her new book, A Faster Grave, will be our guest. So hope to see you then. Have a great week and a great holiday. Good night.